Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to talk about a very important issue, and that is the issue of sexual assaults in
The Senate is in a quorum call.
Oh, may I ask the quorum call to be rescinded?
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to talk about a very important issue that I spoke about on the floor yesterday, and that is eliminating sexual assaults in our military, making sure that victims are supported, that they get the support that they need. And yesterday on the floor, I talked about important reforms that we are doing together on a bipartisan basis to make sure that victims receive special victims counsel. So each victim is now going to receive an attorney that represents him or her in the system and stands up for their rights, making retaliation a crime under the Uniform Military Code of Justice so that victims of sexual assault understand that they will, if they are retaliated against, that there will be a crime for that. And in fact, those who retaliate will be brought to justice. And the many other of dozens of reforms that are in the defense authorization. But today I want to talk about a very important issue. And I see on the floor Senator McCaskill, who I believe I want to commend her for her leadership on this issue. She's been a tremendous leader. Senator McCaskill, Senator Fisher from Nebraska, and myself have introduced an amendment that will further strengthen the historic reforms that we discussed yesterday on the defense authorization, including having in it allowing a victim to formally express their wish about how their case will be handled, in addition to their being, of course, provided special victims counsel, to provide the prosecuting attorney the ability to disagree with the commander's decision, which I will talk about more, and to have a review of that decision by the civilian head of each force, and then to eliminate things like the good soldier defense. And then those who feel like they have been discharged from the military or how their discharge has been described will now get an opportunity to have their case reviewed. So we're not only looking forward, but we're going to look backwards to make sure that victims of crime know that they will be treated with dignity and respect. I come to this issue as someone who was a prosecutor. I spent most of the cases I prosecuted were murder cases, but I also had the chance to serve as Attorney General of our state, where I worked with not only victims, murder victims, but also victims of sexual and domestic violence. And this is a set of crimes that is unacceptable in society, but particularly unacceptable in our military, where we expect the very best from our military. And I looked at this issue very carefully, the issue that has been discussed so much on the floor today, and that is, in handling sexual assault cases and other types of cases, should the military justice system be changed fundamentally to take the commander out of the decision on whether or not a charge will be brought after an independent investigation? And I came down on the side of we need to hold commanders more accountable, not less accountable, because everything within our military, of course, it's deployable. We have the finest men and women who serve our country in the world. We have to have a military justice system. It's structured in a way that it can bring justice in Afghanistan as easily as that can bring justice in the United States of America, wherever our men and women are situated. And if we take commanders out of the decision-making process, then fundamentally we're holding them less accountable for the results of how these cases are handled. And so I would like to talk about the proposal that Senators McCaskill, Fisher, and I have that I think will hold commanders much more accountable. Right now, as we look at cases of sexual assault in our military, we want victims to understand they can come forward. And when they come forward, we want them to come forward. They will get the support that they need and deserve that their perpetrators will be held accountable for the crimes that they have committed. And we want commanders to establish a climate within their unit to say no tolerance when it comes to sexual assault. And if you don't handle a sexual assault case properly, you will be relieved of your command. That's what this is about. So in our proposal, rather than remove commanders from the decision making, and let me just say how this works so people understand. Right now, a victim of a sexual assault or another serious crime comes forward, and they don't have to come forward through their chain of command. They can come forward through a healthcare professional. They can come forward through a 911 call. They can come forward to their pastor to report a sexual assault, and then it is independently investigated. And from there, that investigation is presented to a JAG lawyer in the chain of command, who then makes a recommendation to the commander of whether a charge should be brought and whether there should be going to a military trial at that point. And so to take out of that decision of the commander is now to leave a victim in a situation where, let's put this victim in Afghanistan. They're in a situation where the case has been investigated, it comes back, and the commander now doesn't take responsibility for whether a charge is brought. The commander's now put in a situation where, I'm sorry, that decision's being made by another set of JAG lawyers that are outside of the chain of command. And so go talk to the lawyers over here, not me. It puts the commander in a bystander responsibility rather in a responsibility of taking responsibility for these decisions. So what we have done is made commanders more accountable. When the JAG lawyer comes to the commander for a recommendation saying this case should be brought on a sexual assault case, if the commander says no, it should not, that will go all the way up to the civilian secretary of whatever force is involved, whether it's the Secretary of the Army, the Secretary of the Air Force, each branch, and will be reviewed separately. That will hold commanders more accountable than turfing it over to a lawyer over here where the victim has to hear that, I'm sorry, I can't tell you what the decision is on your case because there's a lawyer over here making this decision. And even in the case where the commander and the JAG lawyer both agree that a charge should not be brought, under our proposal, there will be another review of those cases up the chain of command to say someone else should look at it. There should be accountability, and there should be accountability at every level of our military to ensure that victims of sexual assault will be supported and that these cases will be handled and that the perpetrators will be brought to justice. There's been a lot of discussion on the floor today. All of us want more victims to come forward and feel that they can report their case, because not enough of them have come forward. Yet the evidence shows that if we take commanders out of it, that we're not necessarily going to get any more reporting. In fact, we have cases that may not be brought to justice because the evidence shows that commanders are being more aggressive than the actual JAG lawyers in terms of cases that are being brought. In fact, if you look over the last 2 years, there are 26 Army victims where the JAG lawyer said, don't bring the case. The commander overruled the JAG, went to trial, and the perpetrator was convicted. There was justice for the victim. And under this proposal, those cases would have never gone forward because the lawyer would have said, the JAG lawyer said, no, don't bring it. 16 cases in our Marine Corps over the last 2 years where that would have happened as well. 16 victims who wouldn't have gotten justice. 1 Navy victim, 9 Air Force victims who would not have seen a conviction for their perpetrators, the rapists who deserve to go to trial, to be convicted, to be judged, and those cases would not have gone forward. So when I hear Senator Gillibrand's proposal, which let me just say I respect her very much, and so much we agree on in all of this. And I respect the work that she has done on this and the work that we've done together on many of the provisions that I've talked about. But when I hear the discussion that taking it out of the chain of command will cause more reports to come forward, well, if less cases will go to conviction, if I'm a victim, how does that make me feel more like I want to come forward and report my case? If I know that maybe my case won't be brought, or there's a set of cases that would have never been brought if a commander who had responsibility within his or her unit for this hadn't recommended that this case go forward. Now, the other argument I know we've heard a lot about is that our allies, many of our allies, have taken it out of the chain of command, including Canada, Great Britain, Israel, Germany, Australia. Well, there's been a misunderstanding out there, because as we researched this issue as to why our allies took it out of the chain of command, we found out that the truth is that they took the decision on whether a commander would make the decision to go to a trial on a sexual assault case or other serious felony. They took it out to protect defendants, not victims. I can assure you that we are here today, with all due respect to defendants, and I've defended cases as well, because they certainly have rights under our laws, and I respect that. But this is about protecting victims, and our allies changed their systems to protect defendants. What we're trying to do is have a victim-friendly environment where people will come forward and where perpetrators will be held accountable. And the other thing is, if you look at those countries, Canada, Great Britain, Israel, Germany, Australia, that have changed their system, they have not seen any greater reporting. In other words, it's one thing if we looked at it and we said, in those systems, victims are coming, when they changed their system, the victims came forward. That's not the case. That's not what the evidence shows. And facts are stubborn things. But as a former prosecutor, I want to make decisions on how to address this very real and important problem based on facts. And the facts is that there are cases that wouldn't have been prosecuted if we took it out of the chain of command, of perpetrators that should have been held accountable. Our allies did it, but they haven't seen any greater reporting, and they did it to protect defendants. So what do we want to do? Let's hold our commanders more accountable. And this is what some of former leaders of our military have said. Colonel Lisa Schenck, U.S. Army retired former Judge Advocate General. She spent 25 years in the military. And we asked her about these two proposals, and she said, if you take out the convening authority, meaning the decision-making process from the commander, you are essentially gutting the military justice process. If you take the court-martial process away from the convening authorities for sexual assaults or for major offenses, that allows them to say, hey, the JAGs are dealing with it. They need to be held accountable, and they need to be part of a process. We don't want to create a situation where we say, I've turfed it to my lawyer over here. Here's the lawyers over here are going to make the decision. Commanders should be held accountable for those decisions. And in fact, we had a woman who is currently in the Marine Corps come to the Republican conference, and she's a woman commander, very impressive to have gotten where she has in the Marine Corps. She works training our Marines, and boy, I was so impressed with her experience. She's commanded at every level. And she said, if we want to get this done for victims, don't make commanders a bystander. And that's what makes me very worried. If I thought that taking the commanders out of the decision-making process would help victims further, I would do it. But as she described, if you make a commander a bystander, which is what this will do, what the proposal that is on the table, that my opponent, certainly the proposal that Senator Gillibrand has, who I very much respect, and I know her passion is very real for this, and I share it. I don't want commanders to be bystanders, and that's how, if they're bystanders, then how do we relieve them from command when they don't do their job on this, because we've taken the decision-making from it. And here's the other issue that has really concerns me. We've spent all the time, rightly so, trying to address this issue of sexual assaults in the military. But the Gillibrand Amendment that is on the floor doesn't just take sexual assaults out of the chain of command. It takes out murder, manslaughter, death or injury of an unborn child, stalking, rape, we've talked about rape and sexual, larceny and wrongful appropriation, robbery, forgery, making, drawing, or uttering check, draft, or order without sufficient funds, maiming, arson, extortion, assault, burglary, housebreaking, perjury, frauds against the United States. And we need to understand that the reason we have a military justice system structured the way it is because we deploy to places like Afghanistan. And so not only in sexual assault cases where will the decision of the commander whether or not to refer the charge for a trial be changed under the Gillibrand proposal, but all of these crimes in which we have not received any testimony about. I mean, we have not received evidence that the commanders are mishandling murder cases, manslaughter cases, arson cases, extortion, assault, burglaries, frauds. And so this is very much a fundamental change, not only in the area of an area we all care passionately about getting right to make sure that victims of sexual assault are supported, but all of these crimes will now be removed from the Military Code of Justice. And how will that work in Afghanistan? I'm trying to figure out. There have been over 900 cases, as I understand it, where some type of trial has had to be held because of offenses that were committed in Afghanistan of all different types. I'm not talking about just sexual assaults. I'm talking about all kinds of crimes. How's that going to work? Are we going to wait to say, well, we'll wait to see whether we should bring this trial when the lawyers that are located somewhere yet, we don't know where, could be the Pentagon, so we'll wait for the lawyers from the Pentagon or wherever this separate set of lawyers is going to be until we have justice in places like Afghanistan. And this is for all of these cases on all of these crimes that we haven't even had any testimony about before the Armed Services Committee to address an issue that we all care very much about. So, Mr. President, let me just say, I'm sorry, the 900 actually came from Iraq and Afghanistan, I want to correct for the record. But as we know, Iraq, this could have been just as much of an issue in terms of having a deployable military justice system to ensure that victims of all types of violent crimes, no matter where they are, will get justice, and that perpetrators, no matter where they are, will be held accountable for their actions. And that's what this is about. Mr. President, I thank the Chamber for all of the work that is being done on this important issue. I know that after these proposals, both Senator Gillibrand's proposal is voted on, as well as the proposal that Senator McCaskill and I have and Senator Fisher, that we will be working together to make sure that there's accountability on this issue, that the reforms that are already been passed that are in the defense authorization, they're very important, things like the Special Victims Council that I mentioned earlier. But please know, I see Senator McCaskill here, and I know that she and I, as member of the Armed Services Committee, we're not going to let this issue go, that there will be follow-up to make sure that the military is held accountable. We have the best military in the world. This does go to the core of our readiness of good order and discipline. You can't have good order and discipline if you put commanders on the sidelines. We will hold them more accountable under our amendment, Amendment 2170. So thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to speak on this important issue, and I yield the floor.